Welcome to week 6 of Intro to Practicum. This week you're going to learn the importance of good note taking that will capture the therapeutic process that you are following in treatment, the progress or the lack of progress that the client is making, barriers to treatment, as well as other items, issues that you need to include in your notes. I'm going to introduce you today to SOAP notes, to DAP notes, to the Gilman notes, and much more. If we have time, we'll also do an overview of how to use electronic health records. So this whole issue of documenting your work, taking good notes, is of vital importance. I've said it in earlier weeks of this course, but if you don't take good notes, if it's not documented, it never happened. The only protection you have to the good work that to demonstrate the good work that you're doing with your clients is your documentation. So there are some different options available for taking notes. Today we'll look at the SOAP note, which is probably one of the most utilized model that's out there. Then the DAP note, we'll look at it. We'll go and look at the basic SID note format, and then we'll look also at the Gilman HIPAA notes for therapists. It's important to begin our conversation with this understanding that HIPAA treats clinical documentation in a certain way. HIPAA allows for a psychotherapy note, also known as a process note, also known as a private note. It allows for this psychotherapy note to be used during a treatment session as the private note of the clinician. These notes are almost exclusively private. The therapist, the client, the insurance company, nobody has access to these. There are a few exceptions, as you can see on your screen. If there's a court order or a subpoena for your psychotherapy notes, that's one exception. If there's a lawful request from a government agency, that's an exception. Or if there's a lawful request from a law enforcement agency is the third exception. So other than these very limited circumstances, psychotherapy notes remain private to the therapist. Even, as I said, the patient cannot obtain these notes. So let's look at the other type of note, the progress note. That is the record of treatment. That is what stays in the client's file. The client has access to this. Insurance companies can have access to this for billing purposes. We'll talk more about who has access to progress notes. But the progress note is a documentation of the following items: the diagnosis, medications that you may prescribe, any clinical tests that are run, types of treatment, what the prognosis and progress is each week from week to week. So the progress note is part of the client's official records. I want to give off this warning. It's very important to note, and the pun is intended here, that psychotherapy notes and progress notes cannot be mixed together. They have to be in two separate sections of the client record. According to HIPAA rules, The following items are excluded from note confidentiality. We've talked quite a bit about confidentiality, limits of confidentiality. Here are the items that are excluded from note confidentiality. Results of clinical exams, therapy session start and end time, starts at 10 a.m., ends at 11 a.m. The modalities of treatment. Am I using CBT? Am I using EFT? Am I using DBT? And medication. These items are excluded from note confidentiality. I mentioned the Gilman-HIPAA note format. Now, Dr. Peter Gilman created this note format that follows HIPAA rules while also being easy to use. And he did this in an effort to prevent you and I from inadvertently including protected information, i.e. psychotherapy note content, into the progress note. Here's how it works. Record the start and end time in your therapy session. Record the treatment modalities used. And summarize the symptoms, the diagnosis, the treatment plan, and the prognosis. Here's an example. This is the abbreviated progress note. So let's say you're working with client number 420. You started at 10 a.m. on January the 20th, 2020. The session length was 50 minutes or 45 minutes, however long the session was. The billing code, let's say it was a 90847, which would be a family session. Who was present? Was it an adult male? Was it an adult female? Was it a child male? Was it a child female? You don't have to put their names in there. Who else was present? Let's say you had a child male and the mother. You would write mother in on the other. What were the symptoms? Disrespect toward mother, mood dysregulation, frequency or duration since the last visit, averaging 3 times a day, for example. What was the progress? Was there a setback? Or was there any accomplishments? So you have a place there for 3 symptoms, 3 duration and frequencies since the last visit, and was there setback, was there initial progress, or was the goal achieved? Explanatory notes. You could write in here explanatory notes. You could use some of the client's own words. You could explain your perspective, your subjective thought about what was going on. You would write interventions used, any homework assigned, and the client's feedback in response to you in the session. What is the plan? We'll continue with treatment. What's the plan for the next session? Am I going to modify it, the plan? If so, I need to write it here. What's the date of the next session? What time? AM or PM? Crisis issues. Client denies having thoughts of suicide, homicide, abuse, or crisis. What crisis was addressed in this session? Then you can write it in here. Then you give your signature. I would put LMFT because I'm licensed, and the date. Then case, consultation, or supervision notes. Here is where you would put notes that you want to take to your supervisor. Were there any collateral contacts? Date, the time, who did I speak with? Notes about that. Did I have a written release on file? Therapist signature, supervisor signature. So that is the Gilman progress note. Simply answering, what symptoms did my client present today? How is this impacting their ability to function? What progress did my client make since the last session? How does this change my thinking about the diagnosis, treatment planning, and prognosis? What's my immediate treatment plan and recommendation, and what's my immediate prognosis? So we're going to move from the Gilman to the basic SID. I like the basic SID. I know people who utilize this. Here's what the letters stand for: behavior, affect, sensation, imagery, cognition, spiritual and or religious, interpersonal, and drug and biology. Behavior refers to what you see your client doing and not doing. Affect refers to both your client's mood and their congruence with expressing their mood. Sensation refers to your client's awareness of his five senses and includes hallucinations, perceptual illustrations, muscular tension or pain, excessive sensitivity to environmental stimuli, and what the client saw and heard. Imagery relates to their past, their present, and their future in any way that includes dreams, fantasies, obsessions, flashbacks, responses to guided imagery. The cognitive is focusing on the client's constructed meaning of whatever's going on, their self-talk, mental abilities, personal narrative, beliefs, and mental schema. Spiritual includes your client's beliefs related to a supreme being, affiliation and practices with religious groups, religious resources, conscience and moral development, themes of guilt and forgiveness, creativity, and personal comfort related to the ideas of spirituality. Interpersonal refers to the relationship with others, the level of social skills, the degree of acculturation, and any incidents of social injustices. And then drug and biological includes their use of chemicals, both legal and illegal, medical compliance, concerns, and any incidents of delirium or dementia. So we're going to move on to the DAP note. Now this is a mnemonic that stands for data, assessment and response, and plan. The DARP or the DAP note. Now the data includes both subjective and objective data about the client as well as the therapist's observations and all content and process notes from the session. So in this section, you're including both subjective and objective data. In the assessment and response, that includes your clinical impressions, hunches, hypotheses, and rationale for your professional judgment. Progress or lack of progress is also noted here. And then plan refers to your original treatment plan and any response or revisions that you need to make based on your most recent interaction with your client. Now, SOAP note is probably the most used, most recognized type of note. It stands for subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. The subjective part of the note includes only the client's subjective information. This is where you will use verbatims. This often looks like a summary statement or a direct quote from the client. For example, last week was horrible. My kids were worse than ever. This whole counseling thing is not working because no progress is being made. That would be the subjective part of your note. The objective portion of your note is observable data or information that coincides with the subjective statement that your client made. Typically, it includes client's body language and their affect. So if your client comes in and says, last week was worse, the kids were worse than ever, this whole counseling thing's not working, everything you're telling me to try and that we work on just does not work in session. So my objective portion would be, I would be documenting what I'm experiencing from the client. If she's in there by herself, for example, I can only document what I'm seeing from her. She seems stressed. She seems overwhelmed. She is giving up hope that therapy, the therapeutic interventions being used are not helpful. Her body language was little eye contact. She was kind of looked defeated, did not make eye contact, and her affect was pretty low. So that's the objective portion. The assessment is your professional and clinical judgment based on both the subjective and the objective statements. So my assessment of this client, fictional client I just shared, might be something like this. With the client's report that last week was worse than ever, the kid's behavior was worse than ever, she's questioning whether the therapeutic interventions are working at all, that combined with her low affect, not making eye contact, and presenting as totally defeated, writer believes that client's ability to utilize worked on interventions have decreased over the past week, period. That's my assessment. Now my plan. What am I going to do about the future clinical work we're doing together? Did I give any homework? Did I make any referrals? Did I do any interventions? Do I need to follow up? So in this scenario that I've been sharing, I may say, writer worked with client to review the interventions that we've been working on in session. Writer reframed the negative thoughts the client had about none of this counseling is working, and I would put that in quotes, and reminded her of the success that she's had subsequent to last week with implementing the strategies that had been working up until that point period. So that is a SOAP note. So as you work this week on your assignment to create a good note, you can use any of these, the SOAP, the DAP. I would recommend the SOAP because that's the most recognized, most common note that you'll find, and start making progress notes on your client that you've been working with, you developed the treatment plan for, and you get to, at this point, kind of take the imaginary lead on the work that you're doing with the client. I want you to document. Let's use the SOAP note. You get to totally be the voice of the client this week, as well as the voice of yourself as the therapist. You've been doing great work. I'm excited to see what you're going to turn in for your SOAP note.